I'm delighted to be joined today by Allan Sandilands, Head of Environmental Sustainability for the Bell Group. Allan, thank you so much for joining me. Hello, how are you doing?
Pleasure. Thanks for having me, Peter. I'm doing well.
Fantastic. Okay, let's kick things off. Can you give us a brief background into your career and also who the heck you are?
Yeah, sure. Well, career-wise, I've been predominantly in the environmental sustainability field my entire career. It kind of started from a position of being good at sciences at school, but not wanting to be in a lab. And I thought, what kind of career path is that going to give me? And it led me down a route of kind of environmental auditing and being out on site, dealing with kind of clients and things like that. So that led me into consultancy. And I started out with a small asbestos removal consultancy, and they trained me up to be an asbestos surveyor. So that got me involved with buildings in the construction industry and crawling around loft spaces and roof spaces trying to identify asbestos was a very good introduction to the built environment. And from there, it kind of grew. I stayed in consultancy for a number of years, learning about the sustainability assessment products like BREEAM and LEED and CQUAL, and basically advising clients on how to benchmark performance and try and reach new levels of sustainability performance. And from there, I joined Zero Waste Scotland, and then ended up managing consultants who I used to work for. So it was poacher turned gamekeeper. So that was quite interesting. But yeah, that was a different shift of trying to influence an industry or a sector in terms of, rather than an individual client, what resources or what guidance can I put out there in the world that's going to help that sector take action a bit more. And after being the construction lead for Zero Waste Scotland for a while, I joined the public sector, and I had a spell with the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service and one of the NHS health boards up in Scotland as their kind of energy and environment officers and managers. So what I've tried to do is get a bit of experience from different angles. So it was good to go client side and see how they're trying to introduce sustainability into an estate. And then I went back to consultancy again and was with Resource Futures and leading up their circular economy program for a while. So going from energy sustainability, the whole topic, back to being focused purely on waste and resources. And now in my current role in Bell Group, I'm back to being the kind of broad horizon again, but this time from a contractor's perspective. So I've tried to kind of get a well-rounded career, hopefully, from different angles, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like it, and the irony isn't lost on me. The fact that you wanted to be out and about and in that environment, and there's a storm battering your building at this moment in time. Fantastic stuff. Okay, let's just move it on a little bit, or should I say, let's take a step back. In terms of, you said it was more at school that you got into this type of thing. So has environmental sustainability and almost looking after the planet always been a focal point to you? You know, where did that come from? What was the trigger point?
I would love to say I've always had that kind of passion. I haven't, to be honest. I went down the route of what am I good at and tried to find a career for those skills. And it's over the years that I've become passionate about the subject. I like to use the analogy of once you shine a light in a dark room, you can't help but see the light. And I think that's where I kind of view a lot of the environmental things that I've seen. Once you've witnessed things on site, once you've witnessed performances, issues, you can't unsee it. And therefore you see it everywhere you go. You take pictures of bins when you go on holiday. It's an affliction that you develop. But I've always very much viewed it as I'm not on the far end of the scale as to what I've seen a lot of colleagues be, and a lot of people in the industry who are very on the kind of activism level. I tried to look at it as in how could I convince the mass market to move rather than convince the individual. So I want to put in place solutions that bring everybody along, and that might be slower, but I haven't been, I'm not that kind of niche person that's kind of live, breathe it myself. It has to be easy for everybody, and that's where I've tried to kind of bring my solutions to the table.
Yeah, and it's more about that long-term focus than having that instant impact, that gratification, but then it's almost all right, well, what next?
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's about putting systems in place. I think you can get sporadic bursts of energy and activity in certain areas, and they can quickly dilute. And I guess what I want to put in place is something that helps the people who are doing it regularly. The system should promote them, and it should shine a light on them, whilst also bringing everyone else up, rather than it being down to the individual to always make the choice.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, and it leads me really nicely onto the next question, and that's about your involvement in the, let me get this right, Resource Efficient House for Zero Waste Scotland project. So just talk to us about that.
Yeah, well, when I was the construction manager with Zero Waste Scotland, at that time we were presented with an opportunity. The BRE had an innovation park in Scotland that they were looking to develop. They already had one in Watford, down south, on which they had a number of kind of exemplar housing projects there. They wanted to replicate that in Scotland, and I seen an opportunity for us to take a plot on the innovation park and build something that would give me a platform for the construction messaging that I was looking to push, but also for Zero Waste Scotland as an organisation to talk about everything. So we had visions of, if you wanted to promote the Love Food, Hate Waste campaign, you could do something in the kitchen in the house. You know, it was trying to link all of our messaging together in a kind of platform. So when we set out, obviously I had never been a construction client before. I've never actually built anything. So it was a first for me to be a client, to try and set the brief, to try and find a developer who was willing to come on board with the project, and an architect and a team who really bought into what we were trying to do. It was supposed to be a 3-year lease for the plot. The idea is that the park would cycle over. That ended up not being the case, and the house was on there for quite a lot longer than that. It's only recently been removed. But I wanted it to show how we could build resource efficiency into the construction part, how you live in a resource efficient house, and then how do we deconstruct it in a resource efficient way. So that whole package was supposed to be built into the choices that we made. There was a story behind every material. Every product that went into the store, into the house, had to have a reason. We had to be trying to communicate something. And the best bit of that for me was the end result and taking the public on tours of the house. So not just industry professionals, but actual members of the public, and saying, would you buy this house? And this is how much it costs, and this is what it's going to cost to run. And without fail, we never had anyone say, no, we wouldn't buy it. And I think that's a massive achievement, about showing how can we bring, if you go to buy a house normally right now, you're not given the option of a zero carbon house or something that costs you nothing to run. You're given the choice between that bathroom or that bathroom, that kitchen worktop or that kitchen worktop. And I wanted to kind of show the housing industry, if you present the consumer with the option, they will pay a bit more for it because it will cost them less over the lifetime. And especially the way things have gone now with energy prices, it's kind of proved to be right. And there's people we build houses and they can't afford to run them, which is a scary proposition.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that fascinating because it almost typifies your whole career in a way, and what you stand for in terms of that longevity, focus on impact in the whole industry, and all those kind of things in one nice little project, which
Yeah.
is pretty cool.
Yeah, it was a really good and interesting project. I learned a lot. We learned a lot, and obviously, there's a difference between preaching and doing. And
Yeah,
obviously, a lot of things that I said, oh, we should be doing this, and when you have to do it yourself, you see how hard it is. And and the biggest thing that we try to influence is behaviour change.
mm.
It's not technological barriers. It's behaviours, and how do we introduce a topic to a sector, to an organisation, to an individual in a way that we can convince that person to see things our way. And that's the bit that fascinates me in terms of my role, is
Yeah.
every person is different, and you need to kind of figure out the buttons to push, and you need to have the resources behind you. You can't go into these conversations not prepared.
Okay, so you just said then your role. So what you're currently doing is you're heading up the environmental sustainability for Bell Group. So what does your day or days look right now?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of 6 months into the role, so a lot of my day job was asking those kind of obvious, silly questions of, but why do you do it that way, and what is that all about, and what end of the paintbrush do you use to paint? Because I will always come at it from the kind of bottom up, because I think that's the easiest way of truly understanding it. And I'm not professing to be someone who has been on the tools and been out on the sites and putting the spades in the ground, but I want to understand from their perspective. So a lot of my day job has been about trying to understand the organisation, trying to build up a picture of it, trying to benchmark where we're at in terms of performance, where do we want to be. So I've been designing a kind of 5 year strategy as to where do we want to be in 5 years' time, and working my way back from that as to
Mm.
what actions do I need to put in place, what steps, what processes, what procedures, what information am I not gathering right now that's going to enable me to get to the point where I want to be the organisation to be. And I think I quickly identified that the company was solid on environmental performance in terms of management, mitigating risks, avoiding spills, that kind of do no harm perception. But where we are now and where we're going to be in the next decade is, you need to do more good. It's just not. It's not just about do no harm. So a lot of the strategy and how I'm pushing the organisation is towards that space. And I'm really glad that the board here have kind of backed me so far, and I've liked what I'm kind of proposing, and they recognise that's the way they want to go as an industry as well, and they want to be seen as a leader in that space. So it's not going to be easy, but it's lots of behaviours and lots of mindsets to change. But yeah, I'm excited about it.
And it's very much that progression of becoming proactive to things rather than a reactionary way of doing things, or doing things because you're told to.
Yes.
We look back on sustainability throughout decades, and it's the one that always gets me is plastic bags in supermarkets and how they celebrate that they've reduced their plastic wastage by X amount, and it's like, well, you're doing that because you're forced to. Why didn't you do that 15 years ago? It's but it's a positive message. It's really good, and you're a man after my own heart talking about strategy.
Yeah, well, I hope so, and I completely agree. But I think the plastic bags one is it's a really interesting one, and it comes back to that analogy about shining a light in the dark. Once you spotlight something, and that's where I would, when I was in Zero Waste Scotland and in previous roles, I always tried to encourage clients to shine a light on something, even if it's just start measuring. Don't worry about setting a target yet, because just by shining a light on it, you're going to learn so much, and the path will kind of become illuminated for you. I always said that until a a lump of concrete rolls off of a construction site and kills a dolphin in front of a BBC camera, are we going to start to really look at the construction industry in the same way as Blue Planet effect had on the plastic industry? And I think that's very much needed. I think the construction industry is very guilty of accepting a lot of things like waste. If you walk past a restaurant and the bins are overflowing outside, you'd be disgusted. You wouldn't go in that restaurant. But if we walk past a construction site and the skips are overflowing, we just go, oh, it's a skip. It's meant to have that in it. And I think there's a lot of, considering the size of the impact that the construction industry has, I think we need more lights shone on it to lift everybody up, because there's too much, look what I did on this project here, and wasn't it amazing? Because the client asked us to do it on that project, and it's an exemplar and it's a pilot. And I'm much more interested in how do we lift the mainstream, how do we lift the bar for everyone, because that's what we need, is everyone to kind of be on this journey, not just the leaders in the space.
Yeah. So on that thread then, if organizations are looking to focus on an environmental sustainability strategy, which is fundamental to your role, as you alluded to, at 5-year plan, how do they start and then subsequently continue down that road?
For me, I started by understanding the business, understanding where our impacts were, both good and bad, so that we can shout about the good more, but also focus in on where are we having the most impact and damage, and where do we have the opportunity to influence. Once you've mapped that out, it becomes quite easy to kind of know where you need to start. Now, there's always someone who could come in and go, but you're not doing X, Y, and Z. And like, maybe not, we're not doing everything, but let's do what we can influence really, really well, and then look to expand. So for me, it started with, are we capturing information and data that is going to enable us to make smarter decisions going forward? Are we encouraging our supply chain to give us information in a format that we can use? And the answers to some of those questions is no, we're not. And no, they're not giving us the information that we want. But I'm very much a believer that the more people that ask for it, the more they will change their ways. And also, we need to use our buying power. We need to influence people. We need to say, if you're not, we understand you don't have that information now, but if you don't have that in 12 months' time, then you might find you're in a position where you're not doing as much work with us anymore because others are. We need to, it's not always about incentivizing the good companies that are kind of trying to break in to that kind of established. A lot of people are doing things, they've always done it this way. The market's engineered for them just to compete on price. And then you've got this new niche eco product or eco supplier trying to break in. And a lot of people focus on, how do we give that person a bigger platform? I think we need to start talking about, how do we disincentivize the current way of doing things? How do we make it harder for them to win work by not changing, so that we make it easier for the person who is willing to change and has changed to win more work? So getting that data will start to give you an indication of who's in what camp, who's leading on this, who's paying lip service to this, who's lagging behind, and who needs support, who needs awareness raising, who needs to buy in, who needs to go to all the various courses and webinars out there. You know, it's kind of who's doing it out of ignorance versus unwillingness. So once you've got those kind of components together, it's then about kind of setting yourselves a kind of achievable but challenging goal in the strategy, so that people feel motivated, but you're not going to lose them on the way, because you're not going to meet every target that you're going to set yourselves, and people need to understand why you set the targets that you have. And as I said back earlier, it's about bringing people on that journey with you. It's crucial for me, and the strategy has been communicating into the business this isn't Allan's strategy. This isn't on me to deliver. This is a combination of multiple people and across the business. And that's hard because they have a day job and they view this as an extra. But it's kind of convincing them that this is part of their day job, and they need to kind of own or help drive this forward.
Yeah.
So hopefully it's useful.
And like you were saying there, it's all about that collective responsibility, and also it's that cultural shift and that change between what is a prerequisite, a non-negotiable, to something that's an add-on or an addition to what people currently do.
Yeah.
Just moving that on slightly, and talking about the circular economy, which I think brings a lot of things we've been talking about together. How do we achieve this as an industry, or how do we achieve this as a collective force, if you like?
It's a challenging question because there's no single answer. I think it's about building things up in layers. I'm quite impressed with what the GLA in London is doing at the moment, and they are the first region who are starting to require circular economy planning statements across the industry for developments above certain thresholds. And they've been quite open and honest and put some KPIs in there that they don't even know what they want yet, but they want to put it on the radar of people that it's coming. And I think if we do a bit more of that, it gives the industry time to react, gives them time to develop things. And it also helps they capture data in a way that they can lift the bar over time. So for the next couple of years, they'll measure the responses that come in. And probably in 2-3 years' time, they'll then start to set targets about, well, no, we want you to be less than X or exceed Y in your development performance. And that starting that process of capturing, benchmarking, setting the targets, we have to start somewhere. But I think it's good because it's starting at the phase of development when you've got the most influence. The clients have that power at that stage. And we need the clients to be informed. We need them to be driving this, because I've seen contractors who I consider to be industry leading, do amazing things on projects, and then I'll see them do another project and I'm saying, but why didn't you do it on that project? I know you can do it. The client didn't ask. So we need ways of kind of, I wouldn't say educating clients because I think that's derogatory, but I do think we need a way of informing clients so that they collectively police this through their procurement processes, through their aspirations and targets. And people will need to be dragged kicking and screaming on the way. But I don't fast forward a year and they will be the people that are shouting about how well they've done. I think that's where we need to get people to.
Yeah, humans don't necessarily like change, do they? And I think that's the thing. And I think change is probably the wrong word to use as well. In that instance, it's more about doing what is correct and what's right and what's responsible than it is change. It reminds me of that phrase by Henry Ford, I think it was, that said, well, if I listened to all my clients, they would have asked for faster horses. And it's kind of similar here. Like, it just reminded me of that when you were saying the clients didn't ask for it, so we didn't add it. And it's like, well, yeah, probably because they can't see maybe what you've seen on a different project, like exactly what you were saying there. You've done it there. You haven't done it there because they didn't ask. Yeah. Come on.
Yeah, the problem is it's the kind of level playing field analogy, which we'll always kind of come up against, is if the clients don't enable alternative solutions to be presented, that person who kind of presents the alternative isn't competing on the same playing field. Which is where things like whole life cost comes in, whole life carbon. We need new ways of looking at the solutions that incentivize a different solution to come forward.
Mm-hmm.
If we only ever look at the solutions through one parameter, then how much is this going to cost me to build or to decorate or to refurbish in that kind of mold? We don't get the holistic solutions that can be brought. Yes, this might cost more now, but it saves you more over the long run. What is the comparison of carbon impacts? I think we need to kind of find these new KPIs that enable us to level the playing field more, so that we don't always get. I was going to do the Einstein equation or quotation, which I'm not sure is ever accurate or not, but if you keep doing what you've always doing and expecting a different outcome, is a sign of insanity. So
yeah.
I hope I got that right, and he's not.
Yeah, there or thereabouts. So I'm with you on that. It's one of those quotes that's brilliant. Yeah, you're not 100% sure exactly how to say it. I think it's the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. But again, like either or, it's like it does what it says on the tin, doesn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. If that element isn't willing to change, if we're not willing to change that aspect of how we work, we will keep getting the same outcomes, and we will still see those people who want to disrupt the system struggling in a way. And I'm often kind of, people talk about the comparison between sectors, about, well, why is the retail sector doing more on circular economy than the construction sector? Why is fashion starting to do more than other sectors? And it always comes back to that, the consumer. And what does the consumer ask for? Well, in the construction sector, the consumer is the client, and we need to make the consumer more aware of their impacts, more interested in how they change things, and want to get a different output. As we are seeing with other sectors, people are starting to spend their money in different ways, and markets evolve to that.
For sure. I just want to start to wrap things up and come back to yourself, Allan. What does the future hold for yourself? I know you're 6 months in, 5-year plan, but what does the future hold for you?
This is, it sounds a bit cheesy, but this is my dream job. To be honest, when I started out, this is the kind of job that I wanted to have, that kind of head of sustainability role where you have enough influence within an organization to make a change. One of the issues with consultancy was always, you're giving out advice, they don't have to take it. So I'm not saying they will always take my advice in this company, but I do feel that the opportunity to influence is certainly growing. From when I started out in the profession, the power that this role holds in comparison to 15, 20 years ago is massively different. An environmental manager was viewed very differently now as to back then. So the future for me is, I want to stay with this kind of company, a company that excites me, that's going to evolve, that is going to change, and that's going to present me with new challenges to make sure I'm making sure the company changes in the right way, which is to become a more sustainable organization. So yeah, just trying to help the company on its journey and make sure that it's embedding sustainability in its day-to-day thinking is a big challenge for me. That I'm sure that will keep me going for a good number of years.
That's fantastic, Allan. Thanks so much for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you about your career, about sustainability, and the impact that you're trying to make on the industry, from individual companies right through to the whole supply chain. Thank you so much, Kudos, for everything you do, and thanks for joining me once again.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for having me. Pleasure.